Well, as Pat has just said, it's easy to do in person. I'm gonna meet you, I'm gonna say, hi, my name's John. You can smell that I've showered today, right, hopefully. Have I?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm dressed nicely, I'm standing up straight. This is a personification of a brand. I'm representing my brand, which is Curly, for short, Curly Creative Communications. And we'll talk about brand basics today. And when you start a presentation, it's always great to talk about, well, what are we gonna talk about today? What am I hoping that you're gonna take away from this? And I hope that you'll make it at least past 3 slides. We'll talk about that later. What you'll learn today, what a brand is, and most importantly, what it isn't, and how to build one. But first, we need to clarify some misunderstandings about brand. I mean, that word you've probably heard over and over and over in marketing campaigns, you go to the same place and for the print shop and you get the same cards. It's like, this is your brand, you're branding. Here's the brand, choose this logo. We need to dispel some myths about what brand is and isn't. And I think Pat touched on it really greatly when we first started. It's not just a logo. I mean, he mentioned, and there's a great scene, I don't know if it's a little of a dark film, American Psycho, where there's a bunch of gentlemen at the same table showing off their cards. And they get so jealous at each other, but it's the exact same thing. It happens with branding as well. There's been an epidemic of swooshes. I don't know if you've seen those, like it shows some action, like with an A with a swoosh over it, or the globe. Oh my God, do not use a globe. Please, dear God, and we'll get to that later. It's not just a tag. Curly's got a tag, small business savvy, big agency thinking. It's an introduction, it's part of our brand, it's not the brand itself. And it's not just a product or service. Lots of people like to compartmentalize things into, oh, this brand is a product and that's all it is. It's not just that one item. But wait a second, John. Isn't everything you just described what a brand is? I mean, what is a brand then? Well, it's not what makes it up. It's not the elements, the brand elements itself. It's the reaction. When you meet me, when you meet the brand, when you go to a website, you get a, do I trust this person? It's a gut reaction. Logo, website, verbiage, voice, product, services, they all contribute to that perception, that gut, or what people call your gut. So let's look at this one. What do you think about this brand element? What does your gut tell you? Does anybody know this one?
Oh, wow. That's different.
Yeah. That's part of it. And when you see that, are you taking them seriously? Do you think they know technology? How about this one? A whole lot more. Yep, and Jobs and Wozniak may have loved that original brand work. I mean, we run into this with owners all the time. They've got this really solid idea, this vision for this brand perception that they really like, and it makes sense to them, but they're forgetting the first cardinal rule. As much as we'd like it to be about us, it's about them. It's not what we say we are, it's what they say we are. That gut reaction, that person, what they say when they're thinking. They're thinking, they're going, huh, I like this, I don't like this, I trust this, I don't trust this. Or even more socially, I am talking to you over here and say, well, this company over here, I don't really trust them, I don't really like what they're doing. It's all important to focus on what they think, what they will say. So why is the gut so important? Time. Consumers perceive having less of it. And I'm going to nerd out a little bit here. Is anybody a Star Trek The Next Generation fan?
Yes.
Data, thank you. Data has a great line about time. He doesn't understand how people perceive time because to him it's always constant, which it is. Time is a constant. Time never goes faster or slower. You just perceive it to be. But in this economy that we're working in this technology that we have, consumers feel like they have to cram more into less, and they feel like, oh my God, I have no time. That's why gut is important. Attention, and thank you for paying attention to me for so long, because here's why. Since 2000 to 2015, our attention span has dropped below the attention span of a goldfish. 8 seconds. It's actually 8.25 seconds, but we're going to round down because it used to be 12. So thank you. It's been far more than 8 seconds. But again, that's that gut feeling. I present this information to you, I find this website, I get this business card, I meet this person, boom, instant, either I like them, I don't. Options. For example, there are almost 14,000 cameras on the market, and they're easier and easier to get. I mean, you can go to a website and order it directly from a manufacturer. You can go to Best Buy. You can go to resellers like Amazon or Alibaba. So the instant recognition of, wait, this camera is for me, or this camera is not for me. Trust, again, this has been true since the dawn of time. Before technology, before icons, before brands, before taglines. Do I trust this person? When it comes down to, I'm presented with this information before I make some sort of decision, which ultimately a brand is going to help reinforce, do I trust this? So how do we get a good gut reaction? Well, just like Pat mentioned earlier, sit up straight. Create good character. And good character starts with that idea of trust. And trust is a simple formula, and many of you probably know this. It's reliability and delight. And reliability and delight come from consistency. And that's what you need in your brand, consistency, by meeting and exceeding expectations consistently. And trust creates dollar value. We all know these brands easily, and they make billions upon billions of dollars. And good character is the beginning of something that those last brands we were just looking at, they have. It's called charisma, charismatic brands. A charismatic brand is any product, service, or organization for which people believe there is no substitute. That is the ideal brand positioning for you. Think of it like Apple. Apple versus PC. We think, okay, there is no other option. You're either an Apple person or you're not. Google, the search engine. There's tons of search engines out there. There's still Yahoo. I believe, what was it? Jeeves. Jeeves is still out there. Ask Jeeves. Bing is out there. But everybody goes to Google, and when you think about search engine and when you use the verbiage, what do you say? I'm going to Google it. I'm not going to go, I'm going to go to my search engine. You're going to say, I'm going to Google it. The same thing is with Kleenex. I'm not going to grab a tissue. I'm going to grab a Kleenex. And here are some charismatic brands. You probably know some as well. Amazon, Apple, Disney. For example, Disney. There's children's movies, and then there's a Disney movie. And everybody knows what they're walking into and what to expect out of a Disney movie. It's a great, charismatic brand. And here's the great news. Any brand can be charismatic, including yours. You just have to put the time and effort into creating it. But first, you'll need to master creating that brand, which includes differentiating. Why is differentiating so important? We've evolved that way. We only look for things that are different, like the globe example, or the same business cards, the swooshes. If you see a field of those and you see one that is not a globe, your eye is drawn to that, sort of just exactly like this. Everyone started, I saw all your eyes when I did this. I love putting this up because you went directly there. Why? Because you saw a field, that's the different point. I need to focus on it. We've evolved that way. And again, that brings the idea of focus. If you can't focus, you can't differentiate. And here's a quick quiz, and some of you may be starting businesses, some of you may already have businesses, some of you may have already mastered this. I feel like Thrive and Financial has done a phenomenal job, these guys up here, in terms of their branding. But it's a very, very quick quiz, and if you're honest with yourself, you can give yourself so much more leverage in building your brand. And it's as simple as, who are you? Who are you? What does your business do? What do you do? And really, why does it matter? And remember, with the why does it matter, it's not why it matters to you. It's why it matters to somebody else. And if you do this and your answers aren't compelling, try again. It's time to focus. And then, if those are in line, you have differentiated and you have focused, now you need to focus on your character elements of your brand, which starts with a name, which some of you may already have, or you may be thinking about rebranding, but here are some things to think about when choosing a name. It must be distinct. Does it stand out? Is it brief? Is it a sentence long? I've seen companies that have been way too long in their, I'll bring an example of this. Public schools. I used to work in public schools in their communications department. Every public school had to have a full person's name plus at least 3 adjectives that include A+ achievement, college prep, this, that, and the other thing. Guess what the people actually called them? By one name. So if it was Webster's A+ achievement School of Excellence, they were really that ridiculous. What did people call it? Webster. Appropriateness. Is it appropriate to what you're trying to portray? I mean, if you are a car company and you call yourself Tootsie, you probably won't be taken seriously as a mechanic. And that's just part of the field. I know you want to differentiate, but you also need to fall within a spectrum and differentiate in that spectrum. Easy spelling and pronunciation. That's straightforward. I mean, if you can't spell it, if you can't pronounce it, you're going to shut someone down immediately. Likability. Do you like it? I mean, that goes back to the gut reaction. You say it to people, do they smile? Do they like it? Extendability, can you extend it across multiple media? And protectability, can you protect it by trademark? If it's too generic, for example, don't create a soap company and call yourself Soap. You are not going to be able to trademark that name. It just won't happen. It's too generic, it's too descriptive. Make sure it is different. Well, after you got a name, you need a visual, right? Back to the logo. No globes, no swooshes. A logo, you have some options. You've got a symbol intended to represent a company, product, or brand. Some of those are pretty generic. Icons are the ones that are hot and do a really good job, actually, are a visual symbol that suggests a market position. Visually, it tells a story with the visual. And an avatar is an icon. It's an extension of an icon, but it's a brand icon that can move, change, and operate freely in various media. So it's more of a personified idea of an icon. Here's some examples. Logo, Tabasco. I mean, out of context, I would not know, and if I didn't know what Tabasco was, I would not know that that is a hot sauce. Nothing on there really says hot sauce. It says Tabasco, brand products, McKinley & Company, Avery Island since 1888, made in USA. Nothing about that screams hot sauce to me. Icon. CBS chose this. Why? Because they wanted to portray this market position. They have eye-popping television. And some of you probably remember this if you were AT&T customers. This is the singular guy. And they did this for self-expression. This was an easily transferable avatar that could go on different social medias, that could be placed in different contexts as a persona. That's where the idea of avatar comes in. So these are the options you have for visuals. And voice. I mean, you can walk in, like Pat said, and go, okay, does this person smell like they've showered? Are they standing up straight? Do they look nice? Well, what's the next thing you look for? Or listen to, actually? What they say. Voice with brand is so powerful. It's the next thing, well, you look good, but what do you have to say? And that comes down to how you say it, what you say, and even more so in the digital age, where you say it. You choose to be on different medias, you choose not to be on certain medias. That says a lot about your brand. And here's a fun test if you've never experienced what brand voice is. Apple's great at this. They have a very strong brand voice. But find an advertisement, find some copy, find something on the internet, cover up all references to their brand, then read it. Does it sound like them? Is this differentiating themselves? Are they iconic by doing this? Or does it just sound like general speech? It could be anybody. A strong voice separates itself from the crowd. Next, website. Lots of people think about cards and logos and graphics, but then does the website encompass all of that? Is it slow and clunky? Is it old? Are you trying to be fresh and new? Everything comes back to the website in terms of housing all of that information. It's got the visuals, it's got the voice, it needs to be your brand ambassador. So, once you've done that, you need to cultivate your character. You don't just create a brand, let it sit in a vacuum, and go, hey, whoa, it's doing the work for me. I just let it go. actively, especially with the digital age in terms of engaging your audiences, you need to cultivate it. And brands, they can be like people. I mean, it's, what was it? Who said that? It was something about corporations are people. Well, I guess brands are people too. I mean, it's a personification of the heart and soul of what you're trying to accomplish. And just like people, they can change their clothes if you design them well without changing their character. I like to look at MTV as a great example of that. That M and that TV don't change, except for their clothes. But be careful to never change your character. I mean, once you start trying to go down the road of changing your clothes, you could potentially change your character. And I like to look at this one right now, especially because recently Apple and PC and IBM made a merger and no one noticed. The character of Apple is still maintained as we're still the slackers, the smart slackers. And IBM is the smart nerdy guys, and we're not the same. And it's always good to remember that if a brand acts like a politician, who switches sides, you're gonna lose trust. Just know that you have to be consistent, consistent, consistent. So to wrap it up, to create your good character, you need to differentiate, focus, build your voice, your visual, and then cultivate across all your media. Now you're on your way to building a charismatic brand. Obviously, it won't happen overnight, but with constant work and vigilant work, you can. Any questions? I can't be that good. Or am I? I hope so. But I'm not. I know, I'm not. Is anybody thinking about building a brand? Anybody having problems understanding brand? Yes, Pat.
Yeah, when people are looking at doing their brand, there's little brand effort. In other words, what can you do when you leave this room? What can you do to start building a brand at that point? Then you don't have to go off and do it all at once.
Nope.
You can do little things.
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the little things that you can do starting right now?
That focus test. Go way back. We'll back it up. This. If you are even thinking about starting to do this, this is where you start. And it's little. It doesn't take, well, it does. It takes a lot of mental effort because you need to make sure you're honest with yourself, which I don't know about you, but I lie to myself occasionally. Once in a while, you know. But this is the basis. This is what you can do today. Or you can contact, obviously, somebody like me. I'm not selling my services or anything. Focus quiz. And again, keep doing it over and over and over again. Analyze. Look at your competition. To go back to differentiating yourselves. Do you want to put your globe out there? Do you want to say the same thing that everybody else is saying? How are they going to find you? How are they going to say, well, okay, I'm not going to go with this other brand that's been more established and that I know? Did that answer your question, Pat? Okay. Any more? Yes, you in the back.
No, I guess I'm glad Pat asked that question because basically smaller businesses are the businesses that many of us work with.
Yep.
They want to make sales first. It costs a lot of money to brand per se. So if you were going to brand and using social media, where would you tout yourself or make a pitch on either Twitter, Facebook, or whatever? Or what's your take on that? And if I spend a whole bunch of time on branding, but nobody comes in the door, I can't pay you what you want.
Okay, that's a good question. It comes back to, again, that focus. The conversation of, who are you? Why does it matter? Everything else falls from that. I mean, you mentioned social media. That comes down to voice, where to say it. Well, I wouldn't necessarily put everybody in the same category. You shouldn't be on Facebook if you're targeting X, Y, and Z. You shouldn't be on Pinterest if you're targeting X, Y, and Z. For instance, Pinterest in the US, it's different in the UK, but in the US is predominantly women. If you are not going after a B2C woman, female dominated market, why would you spend any time on Pinterest? It doesn't support your brand identity, doesn't support the perception of it. I mean, it comes back to that focus conversation. You can turn it into what you're talking about as marketing and I want to go to sales, but they all work together and you need to have that hard conversation of who we are and what are we trying to accomplish, and the brand builds from there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I guess a lot of companies think going social media is going to work, and social media is nice to see, but does that translate into sales? I mean, you could get 60 people posting on a great picture that you have, but nobody comes in your door then, right?
Yep, there are problems with social. There's good and there's bad. I mean, you'll probably hear from BusyWeb as well when they talk about SEO. It never hurts to piggyback off of people who've already done the work for you. So I'll give an example, Google+. I have never found a reason to be on Google+, except for that Google likes its own products. That's a simple thing, like I wouldn't waste any serious time on brand building there, but if you have content you're building there, throw it on Google+. It'll help. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Yes, you in the back.
I wanted to just piggyback on what he was saying, because I think you were kind of getting at timing. Like, at what point do you decide that, okay, this is the time I need to start branding and going out and actually, like, possibly paying money for it, as opposed to focusing on operations first and building up your product, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where, especially with my company, I think that's where we're at. Like, you know, what do we focus more on? Should we focus more on, you know, first people realizing, hey, you deliver excellent service, and then, you know, generate money from that, and then use that to possibly, you know, brand yourself and let the world know now that this is what you do.
Well, I would say branding starts at the beginning. I mean, we go back to the idea of focus quiz. Who are you? What do you do? Why does it matter? I mean, as a small business owner, I'm assuming, you are building a bicycle while riding it. So you shouldn't sit and let part of that bicycle not be built, because when you need it, you may not be able to build it. But you can rebrand, and that's a trickier subject to do, especially once you've established yourself. So it goes back to that focus question. You're talking about, here's our product, here's what we deliver. That goes hand in hand with building a brand, your brand identity. You need to answer these questions and then create the brand as it happens.
And once that, if you answer those questions, then you say, okay, now I need a business card. Does the business card, is that reflected there?
Exactly.
And anything you do, so it's a process you go through. If you're going to put your logo on a coffee mug, does that fit your brand? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And does that reflect and make sure everything passes that test? If you do that, as you grow and add things, you're going to end up with a very consistent brand across however you're communicating.
Yeah.
It's sort of like going back.
For me, when I'm thinking of branding, I'm thinking of a bigger branding, not like a logo, business card. I mean, those are the basics. I'm thinking beyond that, you know, like with like the wording for your, say, for example, if you want to put out a brochure, you know, how do you make it? I guess I'm not just thinking of just the basics. I'm thinking of like branding in a bigger version.
Yep. You want to build a charismatic brand, so that voice and that visual should work together. And to bring back the mug as well, it's like the Pinterest example. Okay, does a mug make sense for us based on what we're trying to target versus Pinterest? Would our consumers use this mug based on the image that we create? More and more brands are creating tribes, basically, essentially. It's okay, I'm the motorcycle jock who goes out on Sundays and I drive Harleys. That's an idea, that's a narrative, that's a brand. And that's all part and parcel of brand building. It's not, I bring up, again, the idea, it's the gut reaction. It's not just, yes, we talk about logos, we talk about visual. You need to talk about the gut reaction. What do people see and say when you are presented with whatever company you're trying to create? Does that help? Thank you. Any more?
Isn't that similar when we talk about brand development? When you had that logo up on Apple, that was the original logo they had, right?
This was, yep, the very first logo.
That slowly developed over time.
Oh, they did an about face. It changed to this one, which was the multicolored one, the rainbow one.
Talk about, as a small business owner, so we answered those three questions. Mm-hmm. You started attempting to brand, things change over time. Maybe feel like we're walking on glass as far as changing our logo or changing our, you know what I'm saying?
And rebranding is always a tricky subject to bring up, especially with small to mid sizes, because as you can see, somebody might have been married to this, or you know, I don't think Steve Jobs did, but let's say for an argument's sake, Steve Jobs drew this. and he's the guy. Well, you have to have that conversation of, here's why we need to change it. It's not really presenting a tech-savvy face forward. And that's where it really begins, is that conversation with the decision maker about, okay, let's focus on those things. We've gotten all those answers. Now let's translate that into the visual. So let's focus on our target market. Like, I mean, for Apple, it was all about, I guess it's better to focus on Apple to explain this, is that they understood that this didn't tell a story. Well, it did tell a story, but it was too much. If you can't even see it over here. It says Newton, a mind forever, something through strange? Ugh, I don't know. They actually approached a company to do their branding that focused them on, okay, you need to be different. They answered that question. What are you going to do? You're going to be different. How are you going to be different? With an apple that has, instead of this way, usually an apple, all the apples you see are that way. They decided to push it forward that way to show that they think differently, with a bite out of it. And through the years, they've actually gone more and more flat. The colors were to show the level of variety, basically, the spectrum. A rainbow obviously does that. And then they decided if they kept going flatter and flatter and more tech forward, more clean. They have great branding in terms of advertising, very clean, very white, very basic, very focused. So it went from this wildly unfocused, they answered that question of how are we going to focus our idea of who we are into this whole picture, into this one icon. And from there, that icon keeps evolving. Does that help answer your question? Yes, no, maybe so.
It's getting there, yeah.
Okay, what else?
Well,
Keep
you
going.
know, we're building up, right? So we make mistakes along the way, and sometimes we go down a road that 6 months or a year later we decide maybe that's not the image I'm trying to portray.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give us on switching at those times?
Testing. Be a scientist. In that development stage, you need to test what exactly you're trying to get people to say about you. To go back to the idea of it's not what we think, it's what they think. And you can do some very quick and dirty tests, especially now with social, in terms of soliciting feedback from the people you're trying to get that information from. And from there, you can better hone that image. You can test images. You can test words. You can test everything about your brand as you go along and see what works and what doesn't. Does that better answer your question? Awesome. And I saw you had a hand up.
Well, I was just wondering, things like SurveyMonkey and the like, creating survey as a word that you can shoot around to people that you get some feedback as to the whole everything we've been talking about, graphic we've been talking about, like survey.
Mm-hmm. SurveyMonkey is a great tool. So I agree. If you have a list, if you have a place in which you can put that out there, it's another quick and dirty test. And if you're developing things like logos, another quick and dirty test is to place the name of your business next to something else in a logo that is a competitor. And if they don't look different, if it doesn't look better, that logo has failed, that icon has failed. So again, be those scientists. You were my Star Trek fan. Mm-hmm. Scientific thinking. Test it when you're developing. Any other questions?
Oh, and engage.
And engage. Yes. Warp 2. Engage. Yes.
A little more about Apple computers. And one thing about Apple is they actually integrated Apple into their operating system. As far as the visual and the full software, it actually had I remember, an Apple key.
The command key.
The command key was called an Apple key. Mm-hmm. And so they did some brand development to really drive that point home. But then, remember you had your two guys up there, you had your PC and your Mac guy?
Yep.
So now, it's a Mac guy, he's not an Apple guy, he's a Mac guy. And so how would you explain that?
That was an interesting brand decision. And it was always a problem throughout their development, actually, is Apple Macintosh was a brand, but that wasn't their only computer. It was their premier computer. I mean, there was the LC, well, way back when I first started computing, the LC3, LC2, and then before that, obviously, there was, what was it, Lisa? Lisa was the first one. That was a horrible name. Back to, if we bring it back to the name section, name. It's distinctive. I mean, it's brief. Is it appropriate? It's like Tootsie, the mechanic shop. Doesn't quite ring true.
The Macintosh is actually Apple, the Macintosh Apple.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a neat connection.
That was obviously thought through. It was, we are Apple, and what type of Apple can we use to describe our computer? Macintosh. So.
At this point, I'd like to ask you to hold your questions now, and afterwards we'll be networking. So when this is all over, you can hunt him down and pin him against the wall and get the brand, just shake the brand and secret.
Please, just shake him out.
It's like an apple tree.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening and for giving me more than 8 seconds of your time.